Good morning, Commissioner Fielder. Can you hear me okay?
Good morning. Yes, I can.
All right, very good. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. That's better. I'll call this meeting the Montana Public Service Commission to order. Today's date is Tuesday, September 27, 2022. The time is 9:31 a.m. The other commissioners, please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, commissioners. I would note for the record that present in the Bollinger room this morning are Commissioner O'Donnell, Commissioner Pinocci, Vice President Johnson, and myself. And Commissioner Fielder is participating via Zoom. So we do have quorum this morning. This will be the time and place for public comment. I understand we have some public commenters in the room. Please come forward to the front desk here and identify yourself and spell and state your name for the record, please. Oh. All right, Representative Hill, I understand that you would like to comment first. Is that correct?
Good morning, Public Service Commissioners. Thank you for inviting me or letting me join in on your meeting. Yes, my name is Ed Hill, E-D-H-I-L-L. I'm representing House District 28, Havre. Well, I would just like to say that I think that the way our energy costs are going, I think that the Service Commission, the Public Service Commissioners, yourself, I think there needs to be some sort of an alert going out to the taxpayers of Montana, realization, hopefully they've got a good grasp that this transitioning from our baseload power of coal into or away from coal into more green power, I guess you'd call that, wind and solar, and you guys are aware of this, but I talked to Director Dorrington from the DEQ, and he had used that word transitioning also, and we talked about a month ago, talked about hydro and coal and wind and solar. I agree that with technology, the way things are going, that I think someday we might possibly be able to get away from coal as our baseload power. Maybe we can move into nuclear. I think that's a good option. But for now, we don't have nuclear. We do have coal, and I think that we need to pursue coal more. I think absolutely we should not shut, 2025 to shut down generators 3 and 4. I don't need to be rambling on about this. I would just like to say that with the GOP, the platform having it, geez, I don't have it in front of me. I'm sorry, but oh darn, it talked about preserving oh geez, that's horrible. Well, anyway, yes, so we do have renewable resources. I think that's where I was going. I cannot find my notes about that was recently put into the GOP platform. But also I think that I was dealing with a gentleman named David White about technology that he has in his company Ramrock, about how to take the coal ash, or the I guess it's not called coal ash, but the bottom ash, I think that it would be nice if we could take that that liability of the state and turn it into an asset. If we already have to pay for remediation, that would be we could put forth that money. But I think really what I'm trying to say is, as a representative, I have had constituents in my district that are concerned about rate hikes, utilities going up, and I think that they're just very aware of the 2025 deadline of coal strip being shut down. I don't think it'll happen that soon, but I guess I was hoping that somehow the Public Service Commission could alert the taxpayers of Montana, and maybe it would be a grassroots movement. Maybe the constituents or the taxpayers would come forth and, say we can't have this. But that's really all I had to say, commissioners. Thank you for your time, and I will stand by for any questions or any more comments if need be. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hill. Any additional commenters online? Seeing none. Yeah, commenter in the room, please state and spell your name for the record. Should be a blue light right there.
Good morning, commissioners. My name again is David White. I'm CEO of Ramrock Building Systems out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. I have been in Montana for over 2 years now, 2.5. 2 years and 4 days ago, our company received state regulatory approval for the beneficial use of the coal ash relating to the now defunct, excuse me, the now defunct 1 and 2 generators at Colstrip. And nothing has been done because we have been stonewalled that entire time. Now, that is not your fault. I'm not here to blame you for that. I am here to ask again what you all know about, which is that I and others are urging the commission to issue an alert in the form of a press release, an alert to the people of Montana about what is in fact an existential threat to the energy security of this state. Existential threat. We know we are in the middle or even early stages of a global energy crisis that is rushing at us in the US like a freight train, aided and abetted by an administration that is totally devoted to the Great Reset, so-called, of the World Economic Forum, and to force weather-dependent and daylight-dependent forms of energy on the people of Montana and every other state, forcing fossil fuels out, which is an absolute impossibility. It cannot be done. It should not be tried, but it will be. And because our initiative is to, again, beneficial use of the coal ash CCRs, which stands for coal combustion residuals. The regulatory approval that we have for that is for comprehensive, at scale, beneficial use, and I mean by that remediation at the molecular level and commercialization of all 10 million tons of ash in those impoundments over the course of some 30 or 40 years. But we have the regulatory approval to do it, but we were left in the lurch. No sooner did we get the approval, found out, although we were told by the DEQ, by the director, I was not told. I got it secondhand from another party through a text. But just because we have a regulatory approval doesn't mean the DEQ has any further responsibility. We should go deal with Talon, which makes no sense, certainly did not then, because Talon was at that time in a dispute resolution with DEQ about the cost of waste disposal. DEQ was negotiating for a cost for closure by removal, dig the ash up and move it to line landfills elsewhere, just as the former governor had directed the DEQ to do as he left office in November of 2020. The cost of that was estimated to be $285 million. However, no sooner did he leave office, and this is not a partisan statement, it's just a fact, that the directive was ignored. And even though Ramrock, which upon hearing that the DEQ is negotiating for $285 million, which is on the low side for closure by removal, we crunched our numbers with regard to our technology. Could we do it at that cost? Could we do it comfortably? Meaning, could we at least break even over the course of the initiative? We decided we could. And we let DEQ know that. We urged them directly, the director directly, we'll stick with the $285 million figure with Talon. Because we could meet that same cost, beneficial use at the same cost of waste disposal, a no-brainer. But no sooner did we make that offer, and DEQ turned around and lopped off $122 million in the cleanup cost, down to a supposed, we don't know for sure if it's even that, in terms of money that's been bonded of $163 million. We cannot do closure by removal at that ridiculously low cost. And I seriously doubt that Talon can do closure by removal anywhere near that cost, which leads me to believe, I can't say for sure because things remain in a black box, but Talon will be able to do closure by removal at that cost. And I think what they've negotiated is cap and close, just cover up the problem in place. So all of that time, my company has been left in the lurch, stonewalled. So when we came to the commission urging that it issue this alert with Montana, it was primarily for that reason, with the understanding that there was hope for a solution. And that in that press release draft that all of you have, said that all we're asking is that the commission urge the state of Montana. What the commission understands is at least one state regulatory approval initiative. Investigate it fully. See if we can actually do as we say, the technology, the proven technology, we are bringing to the US. We are bringing to the US, and that it just happens to be Montana where we are trying to start. We can't if no one will listen to us. We are left in the lurch. So an urgent need as the Public Service Commission, it being your fiduciary responsibility. It's your mission. Resource adequacy. Right? Reliable, affordable, sustainable power, which is at risk. So if we can come in with our, what do we call the referring to opposite that, because we can technologically verify, if you will, coal. Take my word for it. I'm not asking that. I'm not asking anybody to. We never have a chemist, a brilliant chemist who has pioneered this abroad in South Africa, to be clear. I'm trying to get him on a Zoom call with responsible people in this state all this time. They can't do it. So if you can please do your responsibility and issue this press release, we don't care how. We know there are things that have happened over the course of the past 6 months of trying to get this initiative through. There are protocol issues. Okay, they could have been addressed months ago, but still haven't been. But we don't care how you do it, only that you do it. And please understand then that as I conclude, as you all know, the words are being recorded. We're going to have Zoom, that is video and voice recording of this meeting. Because of that, and as I finish my words here, understand that as I speak literally, the alerting the people of Montana about this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Additional public comment? Additional public comment, seeing no public comment. All right, we do have a change to agenda. This morning, work session item number 3, which is Town of Saco Municipal Gas Pipeline Safety. That matter will be deferred to the meeting of Tuesday, October 4th, 2022. And I don't see him in the room, but we are having a departure in the agency in terms of staff, unfortunately. Mr. Stusik, who's our external affairs manager, is not in the room. So we will thank him for his service to the commission and all that he's done for us as commissioners, and wish him well in his next endeavor. His last day will be Friday of this week. All right, let's move to action items. Action item number 1, approval of commission minutes for the week of September 20th, 2022. Is there a motion?
Move we approve the minutes, Mr. President.
There's a second?
Second.
All right, Commissioner Pinocci has seconded. Is there discussion or changes to the draft minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of the Vice President's motion to approve the commission minutes for the week of September 20th, 2022, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Minutes are approved. Let's move to action item number 2. This is approval of out-of-state travel. Mr. Reed.
Good morning, Mr. President, Commissioners. I would request that the commission authorize an expenditure to permit staff attorney Lucas Hamilton to attend the NARUC Annual Meeting and Education Conference to be held in New Orleans. I think that several of you are going to be attending as well. The cost for this will be the cost of registration, $495, and then travel and accommodation, which is closer to $1,800 for a total of roughly $2,300.
Is there a motion to approve travel? Mr. O'Donnell, thank you. I move to approve the travel request for Attorney Hamilton. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Pinochi. Discussion? Questions?
Yes, Mr. President.
Commissioner Fielder.
Thank you. Mr. Reed, can you tell us a little bit more about why you're making this recommendation?
Mr. President, Commissioner Fielder, yes. I have been talking to Mr. Hamilton about his and mine notions for his both professional and his professional qualifications and his performance, both of which are excellent, as the commission is well aware. One of the difficulties is that there aren't an enormous number of educational opportunities for staff attorneys in this field. There's quite a few opportunities for folks in the, for example, public power producers, but not so many for government attorneys engaged in utility regulation. There's quite a varied number of educational opportunities, short seminars and similar about the current state of the law that will be happening at the conference. It is an educational conference as well as the national meeting. And so I think it's absolutely appropriate for Mr. Hamilton to get the continuing education that's going to be offered at the conference. If you have specific questions, I'd be pleased to answer them. I don't have the full list of courses to be taught at the conference, and in fact, the abstract for those courses at the current time is somewhat vague in any case.
Follow-up, Commissioner Fielder.
Well, Mr. President, I'd like to make sure that the staff is going to benefit from this. I attended my first NARUC conference. It was the policy summit a couple months ago, and it exposed me to a lot of things, but I can't say that it was a real productive use of my time as far as learning. So hopefully there's a track here that Mr. Hamilton will seek out, and I trust that he will, knowing his work ethic and the intensity of his work for us. So as long as that is something he believes that will improve his already good skills and abilities for the commission, I'm fine with it. But I just want to make sure we're not sending staff just for the sake of going to something like this.
Vice President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me just offer this observation. It is certainly not unusual for commissioners to have legal staff in attendance at this particular meeting. They're traditionally, and I don't have the specific agenda in front of me, Mr. President, but traditionally there are CLE credits that are often attached to participation in a number of the programs that are offered. So there is that. But the other thing that I think really is important is we see more and more this whole regulatory world being national in scope. It is, I think, also beneficial for our legal staff to perhaps establish some relationships with other regulatory lawyers around the country. So I think certainly understand Commissioner Fielder's concerns, and I too would be hesitant to send someone just for the sake of sending them, but I really don't believe that's going to be the case with Mr. Hamilton attending this meeting, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Additional discussion. Commissioner Pinochi.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have seen a value in the NARUC conferences, not only for staff, but I've encouraged it for representatives. Representative Ed Hill, for instance, has taken a great interest in the future of energy within our district. I say our district because Ed Hill and I do work in the same district. So I'm encouraging people on ETIC or Federal Regulation Energy and Telecommunications to start attending these conferences so they have a greater knowledge of what challenges lie in front of us. And then I think when we're before these energy committees, they have a greater understanding of what is ahead of us. And I also think they'll be better versed to work with the energy providers such as Northwest Energy or say Montana Dakota Utilities. So not only am I encouraging staff, but encouraging representatives that deal in energy. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Commissioner Pinochi. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. It has been apparent to me for some time that this commission, being as understaffed as it is, or that there's not a whole lot of unallocated time necessarily, but it has seemed to me that NARUC is a tremendous resource for professional advancement, understanding. There's a great amount of professional benefit to talking with other people involved in the same issues, in particular the legal aspect, to talk things over with other attorneys who are dealing with similar problems or emerging problems, I think is extraordinarily healthy for any organization. And I would like to see this commission take more advantage of the resources available from NARUC. They're a huge depository of experience and information, many different committees there. I think all of the commissioners here are members of a particular committee. I myself am a member of two of those committees there. Vice President Johnson is a member of the executive board of NARUC. It is a highly professional organization and can benefit the work that we do here on this commission greatly, and would like to see more of that. Mrs. Shorten is also an active member of one of the NARUC subcommittees, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Additional discussion. Seeing none, I must confess I forgot who made the motion. All right, so all those in favor of Commissioner O'Donnell's motion to approve staff travel for Lucas Hamilton to the NARUC meeting in New Orleans signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, travel is approved. We will now move to our work session item. Portion of our agenda, I should say. Work session item number 1 is docket 2022.08.079 Haver Pipeline Company. We're here to consider the application for rate adjustment to rural farmstead customers. To consider interim relief, Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Commissioners, you've been provided with Joel's memo and the application and supporting documents. In a nutshell, Commissioners, while this is an increase, the increase is based on the average cost of natural gas, which is the actual cost to gas producers. The application was submitted on July 29th. At the same time, letters were sent out to all of the customers that would be affected. The notice of application was sent out August 31st. The only intervener in this in this case. Indeed, the only comments that we've had in this case came from MCC, which simply intervened as a matter of right and then filed nothing further. So it appears, at least from the record, that none of the customers who would be affected by this increase have any comments, questions, or concerns about the increase, nor does MCC. And I would recommend that the commission order the approval of this interim rate to be effective on October 1st, 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Commissioner Pannocci.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we support staff recommendations.
A motion has been moved and seconded. Discussion. Commissioner Pannocci.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think a good question to get out right in the open is how do these rates with the increase compare to other rates in the state? They're still among the lowest in the state. Is that correct?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pannocci, yes, that's correct. They're significantly less than current market prices.
I think this is important because every time we hear about a rate increase and we vote on it, if we can get the question out that it's still among the lowest rates, that shows that there's probably a good reason there has to be an increase. So we have a duty to make sure that the energy providers have enough money to continue to do business. And in this case, the rate increase still has them among the lowest price. So I wanted to get that out. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Commissioner Pannocci. Additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Commissioner Pannocci's motion to approve the interim rate to be effective on October 1st, 2022, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Reed. Let's move to work session item number 2. This is docket 2022.09.088 Montana Dakota Utilities. We're here to consider MDU's application for its annual gas cost tracking adjustment. Mr. Fink.
Morning. Good morning, President, Commissioners. As you stated, this is MDU's application. It's its annual application for the excuse me, for the gas cost tracking adjustment for the October 2022 through September 2023 tracking period. Montana Dakota submitted its application on September 8th, 2022. The application includes proposed adjustments to its rate 88 current gas cost, the unreflected fuel cost, and the deferred Montana Consumer Council and Commission taxes. The cumulative effect of these changes results in a 0.847 cents per decatherm rate increase for residential and general service customers, a $1 and 0.683 cents per decatherm increase for contracted demand, and a 0.694 cent per decatherm increase for small and large interruptible customers. This week, staff will be noticing the application and setting an intervention deadline. As a reminder, this is an interim order and staff will continue to review MDU's application as the regulatory process continues. With that, staff recommends approval and we're available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fink. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to accept staff's recommendation.
Is there a second? Commissioner Pannocci has seconded. Discussion. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. In my discussions on this, it appears to me that this price increase is entirely or nearly entirely due to the market price of gas. Is that correct?
Commissioner, President Brown, Commissioner O'Donnell, part of the increase is correct. It's due to the cost of the gas. Yes.
But is it most of it?
There are 3 components of this
Yes.
tracker, and the one component, which is the gas cost adjustment, that is primarily driven off gas prices, correct? And
Right.
then, of course, the other other component of the unreflected gas cost is sort of trued up annually, and that's also a reflection of the price of gas. So yes.
Mr. President, the point I was trying to make is this docket item and the previous one having to do with the increase of price of gas is driven not by any profit by any company. The cost of gas, the purchase price of gas is a pass-through, and these rates, these increases are simply reflecting the increase that the company has to pay for the gas. But as the price goes up and down on the cost of gasoline to the companies, the providers, they are not earning like a percentage profit off of that. So this indicates no additional profit to MDU. And I appreciate that staff will be looking at this much more thoroughly. This is an interim order, but I think that pass-through costs, it is our obligation to make sure that the company is not harmed by fluctuations on the price of their commodity, Mr. President.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Well stated. Additional comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of Commissioner O'Donnell's motion to approve the interim order signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Fink. As noted earlier, work session item number 3, Town of Saco Municipal Gas has been deferred to next week. So we'll move forward to work session item number 4. This is docket 2022.07.078. Northwestern Energy. This is Northwestern Energy's gas and electric general rate case. We're here to consider Northwestern Energy's request for an interim rate. Mr. Duncan.
Mr. President, Commissioners, good morning. Wanted to introduce you to the team that worked on the interim, and Grant and Brooke were quite instrumental and contributed significantly to the efforts and the facts and data we used in analyzing this. But I'm going to take the lead on this. So this is docket 2022-07-078, which is Northwestern's general electric and gas case. What you have before you today is their request for an interim. Now, there were 2 memos that were distributed to you. One was I believe a 13-page memo describing in detail the staff recommendations on this matter. The other was a 1-page memo which went into a little more detail on what's happening with the PCAM prices going forward. So utilities often file with their general rate case, they file requests for interim. And in this case, Northwestern filed a request for $114.7 million electric increase and $5.8 million for gas. They requested these interims be effective October 1st. And what I wanted to do today was run through what staff's perspective on this is and how we come about making a decision in an interim. So ordinarily in a general rate case, there's going to be a significant record established during the course of that case. You know, there's going to be multiple rounds of testimony, discovery, briefing, there'll be a hearing. So by the end of the 9-month process, you know, the staff and the commission have in front of it a very robust record to make a decision. Interims are different. There are 12 interveners in this docket, and the only intervener to file any comment on the interim proposal was the MEIC. And the MEIC in their comments only stated that the commission should deny Northwestern's interim request until such time as the commission considered the full evidentiary record. Well, we don't have a full evidentiary record, and we won't have one for 9 months. The MCC has traditionally not commented at all on interim requests, and they have not done so on this one. So when it comes to looking at the record to make a decision, there really is no record from other parties. The commission is pretty much left to its own devices on this. So what we do then is we can turn to the statutes and rules. MCA 69.3.304 is the statute regarding interim increases and decreases. And what it states is an order of the commission approving or denying a temporary rate increase or decrease shall be based upon consistent standards appropriate for the nature of the case pending. So that really gives us a lot of guidance. Consistent standards appropriate for the nature of the case. So moving on, okay, to the rule. What the rule says, this is ARM 38.5.506. What the rule states is that consideration of an application to increase rates on an interim basis in a general rate proceeding will be guided by generally established principles of utility rate regulation. So that is actually something that staff and the commission can work with. Generally established principles of rate regulation. So, first of all, there is a thing called the regulatory contract, which I think is generally recognized throughout the United States as a fair statement of the obligations of commissions and utilities when it comes to rate of return regulation. What that contract says is that a utility will be given the opportunity, and I say opportunity, not a guarantee, utility will be given the opportunity to earn a fair return on its investment and will be protected from competition. In return, the utility will provide service to all customers requiring service. That service will be safe, reliable, and provided at just and reasonable prices. Just as an aside, this idea of traditional rate regulation and the regulatory contract has actually been around for 110, 115 years. These concepts were first established in Chicago with a company called Commonwealth Edison way back when. So anyway, when we look at an interim increase, what staff does is look to see if the utility is earning a fair return for the regulatory contract. But what is a fair return? Well, there are two seminal Supreme Court decisions that are fairly well recognized again across the United States, and they've been recognized by this commission that strongly guide this commission's ROE decisions. And those are the Federal Power Commission versus Hope Natural Gas. That was in 1944. And the other is the Bluefield Waterworks versus West Virginia Public Service Commission. That was in 1923. So that was almost 100 years ago. But these two decisions set three basic standards for appropriate ROEs for utilities. And to paraphrase those standards are: the utility ROE should be commensurate with other businesses of similar risks. 2, the utility should be sufficient, the ROE should be sufficient to maintain the financial integrity of the company. And 3, the ROE should be adequate such that utility can attract investors and capital on a reasonable terms. When we're looking at this, we're looking at their ROEs. From a staff perspective, if a utility's ROE is significantly lower than the authorized return, then the utility is not earning a fair return. And there's a consequence to that regarding the financial health of the company. And again, utility, if this continues, the utility may be put in a position that it can't attract capital or investors on reasonable terms. So it goes right back to the regulatory contract. After analyzing Northwestern's earnings and cash flows, what staff has found is that the analysis shows that Northwestern's earnings are deteriorating. They're not even close to the earnings the commission authorized. Also, there's a concern over what's happening to Northwestern's cash flow metrics, partly because of the PCAM. And Cash flow is one of the prime metrics used by credit analysis when looking at utilities bond ratings. So staff takes seriously this balancing act that is the obligation and duty of the commission between balancing the fair return opportunity for the company versus just and reasonable rates. The bottom line is, there are going to be times when rate increases are necessary for the financial health of the utility. And what our conclusion was in this particular case, what we found is that the declining earnings level of Northwestern on both the electricity and the gas side and concerns over cash flow metrics caused largely by the PCAM, that Northwestern's current rates are not providing Northwestern the opportunity to earn that fair rate of return, which they should be. So I wanted to move on and just go through briefly the sections of the memo. I'm not going to repeat everything in them, but there are 3 elements to Northwestern's electric request. There is the actual revenue requirement for Northwestern. This is for the transmission and distribution and for the generation assets. So the actual revenue requirement, this is where you apply the revenue requirement formula. This is where the return on equity, the profit for Northwestern is established. The other 2 components, and they're asking for $35.5 million interim increase. The other 2 components on the electric side are they requested an $11.1 million increase for the pass-through of 2022 property taxes, and they requested a $68 million increase in the PCAM base cost. On the gas side, Northwestern requested an interim increase of $3 million for the base transmission, distribution, and storage and production revenue requirement. And they're also proposing a $2.7 million to pass through 2022 property taxes. The way we set up this memo and our recommendations then was to break that into 3 sections. So the first section we went through in the memo was the Northwestern electric and gas base revenue requirement. Now the memo goes into a lot more detail. However, earnings on both the gas and the electric side in this regard are declining. And staff believes there is a need for an interim increase. The last general rate case for Northwestern utilized a 2017 test year. Now they're using a 2021 test year. So that's 4 years ago that the base revenue requirements were established for Northwestern on the electric side. On the gas side, the last rate case utilized a 2015 test year. Now they're using 2021. So that's 6 years ago that the base revenue requirement rates were established for Northwestern. Since that time, if you compare the test years, on the electric side, Northwestern's rate base has increased about 20% from 2017 to 2021. Actually, the transmission and distribution rate base has gone up close to 60%. There has been a decline in the generation just simply due to depreciation. But when you take them together, there's an increase of 20%. And the operation and maintenance costs went up, by about 12% for the electric. Inflation during that same period was a little over 13%. On the gas side, Northwestern's average rate base has gone up 33% since 2015. There's actually only been an increase in their O&M expenses of 3%. But because of the multi-year lag from the last general rate cases, Northwestern is currently in the situation that the base rates established 4 and 6 years ago simply do not recover a return on investment that's been made since those cases. It's not recovering the increase in operating expense. Staff accepted Northwestern's interim filing. As filed, we made one adjustment to that filing. That was, we adjusted the overall rate of return to reflect current capital structure and the current debt costs. And as a result, on the base revenue requirements, staff recommends, as you see in the memo, an increase in the electric utility, $29.4 million for that base revenue requirement. On the gas side, $1.7 million. To be effective October 1st. The rate impacts regarding this were all laid out in the memo. That's the base revenue requirement. Second piece is property taxes. So on the property tax side, Montana has a statute, MCA 69-3308, that allows Northwestern to pass through annually its increased property taxes. They file on middle of December. The rates are automatically in effect on January 1st. And because of the statute, there's essentially little or no oversight by the commission in this regard. So the increase in 2022 property taxes they were requesting in their interim are going to go into effect January 1st. Therefore, it was staff's position. There's really no need to include those in this interim. We would deny including those increases in property taxes in the interim request. So that brings us to the PCAM. So the PCAM is the power cost and credit adjustment mechanism for Northwestern. And there, Northwestern is asking to increase the base costs on this from 138 million to 206 million. So that's an increase of 68 million. The PCAM is supposed to be Northwestern's electric supply tracker. Almost all utilities in all states you're going to find have supply trackers. And what they are, a supply tracker is a mechanism to pass through to customers specific significant changes in variable costs, such as purchase power, natural gas prices. And it's to do it in a timely manner. Just remember those words, timely manner, okay? They allow utilities to recover these costs between rate cases. And there is no profit in a tracker. All it is a straight pass through of costs to the customers. In Montana, we have trackers for MDU, for gas and electric. And Northwestern has a monthly gas tracker for their gas, but they're monthly. The rates contained in those trackers are current, accurate rates. PCAM, though, is entirely different. The PCAM rates can only be changed in a general rate case. So the present PCAM based cost rates were established in that 2018 rate case. And they actually went into effect for the first time for the July 2019 through the June 2020 tracker. Because of this, Northwestern has been unable to pass through to customers its increasing electric supply costs. Per the 2021 annual report, if you look at Northwestern 2021, they generated 56% of the power they dispersed. 21% came from QFs, but 23% came from purchased power, about 1.9 million megawatt hours. And it's that piece that is driving up the base costs of the PCAM. Wholesale prices per megawatt hour that that Northwestern has faced have gone up since 2020. They've gone up 140%. Natural gas prices have gone up 225%. But again, Northwestern has not been able to capture those increased. Northwestern is paying those costs, but they haven't been able to get reimbursed because of this PCAM tracker mechanism. So Northwestern undercollected $22 million last year for the tracker period that ended in June of 21. And they undercollected by 58 million this year for the tracker period ending June of 2022. So that means Northwestern paid $58 million during that period for additional power provided to its customers that it was unable to collect. What happens is under the PCAM mechanism, then this under collection will be recovered in adjusted PCAM rates. They just filed this. The under collection will be recovered beginning October 1st of this year through August of next year. So they do eventually recover this money, but it's an extremely horrible timing difference. Okay, they have to wait almost 1 to 2 years to recover the cost they've already incurred, and they do it through the annual update to the PCAM, which was just filed. So if the PCAM base is not increased, I think there's no doubt Northwestern is going to have another huge under collection for the tracker period that we're currently in right now. I think that Northwestern, talking to Northwestern, they said for the first 2 months of this year, July and August, they've already under collected by $25 million. So what are the consequences of these under collections? If you look at it, you say, well, what's bad? They eventually get their money. Well, there are some serious consequences to these under collections. Staff is firmly convinced that the impact of these under collections on Northwestern's cash flow is hurting the financial health of Northwestern. These cash flow metrics utilized by bond and credit ratings show that Northwestern's is well below its peer group. And so what this brings up then is the real possibility of credit rating downgrades if this cash flow issue is not fixed. I want to elaborate a little bit on that issue of the bond. There are 3 major bond rating agencies. They are Fitch, Standard & Poor's, and Moody's. So if you look at these bond rating agencies, they all rate Northwestern Energy essentially the same. They're BBB for Standard & Poor's and Fitch, and they're what's called Baa2 for Moody's. So what do those mean? Okay, well, you can look at it this way. The other thing they rate them is their current outlook is stable. Fitch downgraded Northwestern back in March. And so Fitch now is the same as essentially Moody's and Standard & Poor's. But what do those mean? If you look at the bond ratings, each of these bond rating agencies essentially has 10 grades of bonds that they rate as investment grade. If you made number one, the highest, strongest bond rating, credit rating, and number 10, the lowest within this investment grade, what you'd find is that Northwestern is at a 9 in all three of those systems. So that's 2 notches above what's called non-investment grade bonds or junk bonds. And all 3 seem to have focus on cash flow as one of the things that could lead to a further downgrade. Briefly, what Fitch said is they listed its concerns or issues that could lead to further downgrades. And they were pervasive regulatory lag, under recovery of supply costs. What you're talking about is the PCAM. That continued under recovery amid rising energy prices could further exacerbate growing regulatory lag. They're concerned about the metric they look at is FFO to debt, about FFO. Funds from operation, funds from operation to debt. And they're also concerned about possible negative outcomes from regulators in future proceedings. Those are items listed by Fitch that could lead to a further downgrade. Standard & Poor's says this, their downside scenario is we could lower our ratings on Northwestern if its financial performance weakens, including FFO to debt consistently by 14%, below 14%. This could occur if the company fails to manage its regulatory risk and faces cost disallowance that impede the recovery of its costs on a timely basis. So again, recovery cost on timely basis, that's the PCAM. Notice they set an FFO to debt benchmark of 14%. Northwestern's ratio in 2020 was 12.5. I believe the most recent one that we had was 13.6%. Was that for 2021? 2021, 13%. So anyway, they're both below currently that Standard & Poor's benchmark. And finally, there's Moody's. Moody's lists this: if the outcome of Northwestern Energy's Montana rate case results in an FFO to debt below 14%, that's one of the factors, or 14, yeah, 14. That's one of the factors that could lead to a downgrade. The FFO to debt ratio represents one factor if not achieved on a sustainable basis. So currently on Moody's, this bond rating system I mentioned, where you're rated like 1 through 10, there at a 9. On the current bond rate, on Moody's current system, Northwestern's currently in the bottom 21% of the electric utilities out there that they get bond credit ratings to. If they were to get downgraded another notch to one step above junk, they would be in the bottom 7%. So the credit ratings are extremely important to the utility. The lower the credit rating, the smaller the pool of investors they have to look for money. They have to pay more in fees, they have to pay more in interest, and that ultimately leads for higher costs for ratepayers. So there's a good reason to be concerned about the credit ratings, what's going on there. Two other issues that we didn't mention in the memo is what is the impact of the under collection on Northwestern's customers? And I think these are very important. There's a set of guiding principles on rate making from Dr. James Bonbright. He wrote a book in 1961 called The Principles of Public Utility Rates. You'll see quotes from there throughout commission orders in the United States. Okay. And there was a number of principles of rates that he talked about. But I think there's two that are key here with what's going on with Northwestern and their PCAM rates. The first principle is optimal rates should be clear, efficient, effective, informative, and cost-effective market signals to buyers and sellers. Price signals are very important to customers and to economists. Prices paid by Northwestern Electric customers, they should be accurate and they should reflect the cost being incurred by Northwestern. And they simply don't at the moment. So the price signal that we're talking about here is, as the price of electricity has gone up, if Northwestern had been able to increase their PCAM rates, customers would have seen those price increases in their rates. If they needed to take some sort of action, maybe to mitigate their electricity usage, they would do so. But customers got no such price signals essentially for the last 3 years because those rates are essentially frozen. And I don't believe that's very fair to customers. I will get, as a note, okay, the PCAM rates have essentially been frozen from the base rates from the last 3 years at about 6.7% per kilowatt hour. But Northwestern has a monthly gas tracker. That gas tracker, as does MDU, accurately reflects the price of natural gas. And that gas tracker for the same period, the supply rate's gone from 23 cents to 64 cents per therm, or they've gone up by 173%. So that the Northwestern gas supply rate has certainly been an accurate for the customers, and it's sent an accurate signal to customers as to what their cost of their gas really is. That's not the case on the electrics. Final thing is Bonbright also had another principle. Optimal rates should reflect all the present and future private and societal costs and benefits occasioned by a service provision. What he's really talking about here is what we call in regulation the matching principle. The matching principle simply says that customers in each period should pay for the cost of providing them with that service in that same period. And the PCAM absolutely violates this matching principle. First, the PCAM rates do not reflect the cost of actually serving them for customers. PCAM rates today are only recovering about 2/3 the actual cost that Northwestern is incurring. The second issue about the matching principle is the way this is set up. The refund will go into effect October 1st and run for 12 months, approximately a year to 2 years after the costs were actually incurred. Depending on the mix of Northwestern's customer base, could very well have customers that incurred those costs back during the tracker period that perhaps have left. They never paid those costs. You could have new customers coming online that weren't responsible for costs, but they're going to pay those costs. So how big that issue is, I don't really know, but it's again, it's a complete violation of this matching. So summing up the PCAM, existing PCAM base costs, they need to be increased to help alleviate the cash flow issues. Also, one thing I haven't mentioned is the PCAM itself, the undercollections don't really impact the reported financial earnings of Northwestern because they're deferred on their financial books. But PCAM also contains this sharing piece. You may remember there's a 90-10 sharing component. Sharing on this almost $60 million undercollection that Northwestern has to do this year is 5.7 million. 5.7 million then is a direct hit to earnings of Northwestern because they have. I don't believe that was ever the intent of that 90-10 sharing was to take such a hit. The last rate case, Northwestern received a total increase of $6.5 million. Now they're, because of the PCAM, they're in a position of having to share 5.7, like that off the books. So that's another issue with the PCAM. So staff's recommendation in this matter is to increase the PCAM base to 199.8 million. That's the actual PCAM costs incurred during the last tracker period by Northwestern, and it's an increase of 61.1 million. And after talking about all these issues with the PCAM, I'd be remiss if I just didn't mention something about the future of the PCAM. Staff certainly has great concern with this current PCAM methodology. My opinion, something's absolutely got to change going forward. It's just not sustainable. Northwestern shares those concerns. They proposed a number of issues, adjustments to the present PCAM mechanism in the general rate case docket. So, and they've also proposed these new base costs. So I am sure that over the next 7 months, that the PCAM mechanism itself is going to be subject to great scrutiny and debate. And so are the proposed PCAM costs. And I'm also 99% certain that there will be changes made to this by the time we get out of the rate case. So the rate impacts of what staff recommendations made are on page 13 of that memo. And that concludes my spiel on this. And we're available for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. That was excellent presentation, very informative. I appreciate the time and effort that you and PSC staff have put into this matter. Ms. Umstead, did you want to add anything at this point? Mr. Fink? Before we go to discussion, I'd like to ask you a question, Mr. Duncan, when you're related to the last comments you made about the PCAM. So the PCAM mechanism in the operation there too is a contested matter in this proceeding, is it not?
Yes, it is, Mr. President.
Okay, I would just advise my colleagues to keep that in mind if there's any discussion or question today on the Centrum rate. We have a request for a break for 10 minutes. The time is now, I will gladly accommodate that. So the time is now 10:39 a.m. We'll take we'll go into recess for 10 minutes and reconvene at, how about we go 10:50, 11 minutes.
Yeah. As long as we're in a recess here, I was going to add that I just got off the phone with my daughter who's in Tampa, Florida. Yeah, and she's fleeing inland, and Alexander's parents are in Sarasota. Yes. Yeah. So this hurricane Ian's supposed to hit in that direction in that area. He's category 4, so. That's what they said for Tampa. Yeah. My daughter called me and said, "What should I do?" And I said, "How would I know? I've never been in a hurricane." Yeah, you know.
Commissioner Fielder, are you on?
I am, yes.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Fielder. All right, is everybody ready to go? Tricia? All right, the time is now 10:50 a.m. We are moving out of our recess and back into regular order. Where we had left off was we were in consideration of docket 2022.07.078. Northwestern Energy's request for an interim rate. Before we move any further on this, I would just remind my colleagues again that the PCAM and the merits of thereof and the mechanics thereof are not a part of our considerations. This morning, we're considering the interim rate request and increase. Vice President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm going to move that we approve staff recommendation in docket 2022.07.078. And if there's a second, I would request that I be recognized for brief opening.
Commissioner O'Donnell has seconded. Vice President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to be just abundantly clear that I hated to have to make the motion to increase rates. None of us on this commission or on this staff or with the utility want to see these prices going up, but we are confronted by a thing called reality that we simply have to deal with here. And I want to commend Mr. Duncan and his team for having done, again, a tremendous job in analyzing the issue that's before us. I thank you for that good work. And without reiterating a tremendous amount of what Mr. Duncan shared with us, I do want to reinforce the fact that what we're doing here, should we grant this interim rate request, is simply allowing Northwestern Energy to recover unrecovered revenues and expenses to which they are fully entitled under statute. This is simply a matter of making them whole in the short term with regard to what they are entitled to. And I think that Mr. Duncan's analysis of the potential impact that our failure to grant this increase could have on the utilities' credit rating and their cash flow is truly central to this discussion. That while we clearly as commissioners have a responsibility to keep utility rates as affordable as we can, we are also obligated to make sure that the utility is able to preserve its financial integrity so that it can continue to provide a level of service with requisite reliability. And so with those comments in mind, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. I agree completely with what the Vice President has said. Just to put a finer point, the utility is not only entitled to recovery of this, we are required to make sure that they get this by law. I want to point out that, just speaking for myself, and I believe for all staff and commissioners here, I don't think I'd have any objection to this, that our vote on this interim today, one way or the other, has no effect upon our final vote on the matter at hand. This is preliminary to a deep study of all of the issues by the commission, and we will, speaking for myself, I rely very strongly also on the testimony by the interveners in this case, all very instructive, and this is not to be taken as any indication of my or any other commissioner, I believe, our position on the ultimate issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Commissioner Pinocci.
I think what the ratepayer is looking for is an explanation why are rates going up. So I'm going to ask some questions on that point, so that if it's talked about, those questions were asked. I want to thank Representative Hill for taking part today, because I usually get the phone calls as to what happened, and for him to take part in the meeting answers a lot of questions he won't have to ask. And I will encourage more of ETIC and energy committees to take part in these important meetings like today. So the Consumer Council, I think, is something we need to tackle right away. It looks like they're not in favor of this. And I think the flaw in the Consumer Council thinking is this. And Mr. Duncan, my question is this: it's better to get some money coming in now instead of holding off on this, and then a few months later it could be a great deal more on the ratepayer.
May I point of personal privilege, Mr. Duncan, did the MCC weigh in on the interim rate increase?
Mr. President, commissioners, no, they did not.
Okay, I think who opposed the interim rate increase?
MEIC was the only party to file a comment.
Thank you.
President.
Thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
So do you see that that's kind of a flaw in their thinking, that we could get hit all at once with a much larger rate than if we can approve this today and kind of take some of the millions of dollars off at a later time?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pinocci, if you look at what's going on with the PCAM, as I said, Northwestern indicates they've already have $25 million in underruns for July and August. That's money they've spent, have not been able to collect. The mid-C price for power, I was looking at it. The EIA, the Energy Information Administration, has projected for 2022, I believe, a price at the mid-C right around $70 per megawatt hour. That price in August averaged $156. And in September so far, it's averaged, I think, $153. There was actually one day in early September where that price was over $500 a megawatt. So there's absolutely no doubt that these under collections are going to keep occurring. And if we don't give Northwestern this relief immediately, we're going to end up next October 1st with a huge under collection that's then going to have to be collected in the year after that. And in the interim, the ratepayer is not going to see an accurate bill on what they're actually paying for the electricity, and I think that's a mistake. So I think getting this done sooner than later is absolutely imperative. If you look at how they're earning on their base revenue requirements, their actual returns have been declining. 30 basis points of the decline last year, or that's going to happen this year, is due to that sharing. Grant pulled some numbers for me from the Northwestern's 10Q, which is their quarterly earnings report, which show that for the first half of 2022 compared to the first half of 2021, those earnings have continued to decline. So I think they need immediate relief. The other consequence of this would be, I believe, you're looking at a very good possibility of credit downgrades if we don't do something immediately. So I think it has to be done immediately.
My point is that I'm trying to get to is I could look at the ratepayer and say that we can cushion the rate increase to where it's not so dramatic if we approve this today than waiting months later. And you'd agree that's a fair argument or a fair point to look at to kind of protect the ratepayer from a sticker shock, if you will, if we don't approve this today.
Mr. President, Commissioner Pinochi, the problem is, in my mind, is that you're really not protecting the ratepayer, I don't think, from anything, because they have incurred these costs. They owe these costs. The 25 million underrun, for example, for July and August, that's money the ratepayers already owe. It's not like they're going to get a break on their rates. Some point, they're going to have to pay this. And the consequences of waiting to pay that are not good, I don't believe, for the ratepayer or for Northwestern, for a variety of reasons that I already elaborated on.
Well, to make it clear, for those ratepayers that may be listening or listen later, a good reason to support this today is so that you start paying this now instead of having to pay a great deal more later. That's what I believe I'm trying to get at. So I'm seeing rates go from $71 to $156. I have to believe that is responsible for when we have to realize we don't have enough energy we're producing in Montana. We have to go to the open market, and then we have to pay whatever the market bears. You mentioned up to $500 a megawatt here just not too long ago. If we had a greater share of coal strip, or if we had another generating station that Northwest Energy owned, we'd have a much better position to be buying power at $71 a megawatt. So a reason that we're paying absorbent amounts for electricity is because Northwestern can't produce it and we have to go on the open market to buy it. I think this is a good question to ask so that the ratepayer understands this is one of the reasons we're paying higher rates. Is that what's an answer to that? Do you agree?
Commissioner Pinochi, Mr. President, the reason Northwestern, I believe, is in this particular position is because they're capacity constrained. They do have to go to the open market to buy electricity. Now, whether or not, I wouldn't even speculate as to what the proper source of additional generation would be, whatever. Northwestern is moving now to capacity contracts. That's going to be part of the PCAM costs that are going to be examined in this upcoming docket. But yes, they are more exposed than probably your average utility. Just because, like, as I said, in 2021, they had 23% of the power they dispersed to customers was purchase power. So.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Follow up. So every weekend I've been asked to speak for the last month based on people understanding there's probably going to be a rate increase. So they're putting me on the spot to try to explain that. And I'm pointing towards what I call resource adequacy, that Montana does not produce enough electricity to meet its needs. And when we have to go in the open market, I'm seeing a shortage of electricity throughout the state, throughout the United States, the Western United States in particular. And this is, I believe, is showing us higher prices. Okay. So I'm encouraging the ratepayer to encourage Northwestern to grow the amount of energy that they produce through a greater share of coal strip, through putting in a hydroelectric dam, putting in generators and dams that don't have them, such as Gibson or Hepkin. Because when we are able to produce it here locally, the ratepayer gets a far better deal than we bring it in from out of state. I have to explain this. They want me to speak in Lewistown this Saturday. I just had to speak in Great Falls. I just had to speak in Havre. People are very concerned about the price of inflation, on top of the fact the price of gasoline and diesel, on top of the fact that the prices for energy. And I'm explaining to them that natural gas has went up 200%, like you've said today, probably because we're not able to drill like we normally drill for oil and we don't hit those pockets of gas. So I've got to explain why their rates are going up and they want some real answers and what we can do about it. And I believe an answer is we produce more energy and the price will come down. And that's what I plan to tell them. Now, we've got the price of property taxes is an effect on the price of our natural gas and the price of electricity, because we see that increase to the power company and the ratepayer has to make that up. I was listening for a percentage of property tax increase. Is property taxes taking a large jump to our friends at Northwest Energy, which then we have to pass through? Or do you think that that price has been pretty stable?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pinocci, I don't remember the exact numbers. Northwestern pays a significant amount of property taxes in Montana. I think significantly more, per customer than they pay in the surrounding states. It's a function of Montana's property tax system. I don't remember the exact percentage. In fact, I was going to speculate, but I won't speculate. Okay.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Well, when I explain it this weekend in Lewistown, I'm going to remind the Republican Party that they have control of the House and Senate, the governor, the Public Service Commission, and they all tell me that they're going to lower property taxes, but that's not what I'm seeing. So I'm going to put them on the spot to say, you've got to get a handle on some reasonable property taxes because my ratepayer winds up paying it, and it was brought up today. So I'm practicing with you what I'm going to have to explain. And I think you did a fantastic job telling us about what you had to today, because I've got to translate it to the public who's very upset that their energy rates are going up again. I have to explain why. I also think you did a good job to explain that Northwest Energy is not experiencing record profits. In fact, they've got a loss, and their credit rating is important to me because I want my power company that represents Montana to have a good credit rating. And I think one of the reasons that we want to approve this today is it might up that credit rating a little bit. So I want to directly ask this question. If we're able to approve this today, okay, and they can start getting some money early, do you feel that the credit rating could increase right away, or we'll see an improvement in their credit rating?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pinocci, I would not speculate on that. What I would suggest is that right now, all three credit agencies have the rating they've made for Northwestern, and the outlook at the moment is stable. I suspect if Northwestern was to get an unfavorable result here, you'd see that go negative and perhaps a downgrade. I couldn't speculate what it would take to increase Northwestern's credit rating, however.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up.
Work Commissioner Danley has expressed to me that we may have an energy shortage this winter if the market is stressed. Market can be stressed a couple different ways. A large storm can come in between, say, Canada and Mexico, and everybody turns the power on and we don't have enough of it. Another stressor in the market is a power station goes down, transformer explodes, and then we have less energy. Then the price of energy can increase sharply during this time because the market will call for it. Northwestern's expressed to me that in the last year or two, there's been times where they've needed energy and may not have been able to get it. A question the ratepayer is asking me is if we're going to have a controlled brownout where we just don't have the energy, who decides which town gets electricity and which one doesn't? Okay. is that a Public Service Commission decision, a decision from Northwest Energy? Who decides who gets shut down and who will have electricity in the time if we have not enough power to go around?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pinochi, I really have no knowledge of how Northwestern would handle a brownout situation. I have no idea. So.
The ratepayer is asking me to find out some answers on this because I think we're seeing for the first time, maybe in the history of Montana, to be prepared for this. I noticed testimony from some Missoulian people here that they didn't mind if their power shut off now and then. So maybe Missoula is the one to turn off. I think in the event that happens in 20 below, they're going to have a very different attitude. But at that time, they could see sharp increases in the price of electricity because the market may not even have enough to go around. Is it possible the cost of electricity? I noticed you said $500 a megawatt. It's not out of line to see $1,000 a megawatt, and that's a possibility.
Commissioner Pinochi, Mr. President, I really can't speculate on what the future price of electricity is going to be on a per megawatt hour. I would make one comment on Northwestern's capacity. One of the things that will be investigated in this upcoming rate case is Northwestern is contracting for capacity purchases, and I believe they've contracted for something around 250 megawatts, and from Heartland in Canada and PowerX, and that's being built into the PCAM costs. And I would suggest that will help Northwestern in the situation when power might not otherwise be available to them on the market. But with these capacity contracts, that will help out in those situations. That's as far as I can go on that.
Commissioner Pinochi, I'm just going to remind you at this point of two things. One is that our staff deals with factual questions and not speculation. So I'd ask that you not ask our staff speculative questions because it puts them in a difficult position. And the second thing is I'd remind you that we're acting on the request for a temporary rate increase.
Well, I'll remind everybody that I have to speak Saturday and I'm getting a lot of tough questions. So I'm going to continue to seek answers for these questions I'm asking. No more questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Commissioner Pinochi. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. A couple things that I think need to be clarified. One, very, very friendly clarification in that Commissioner Pinochi referred to the Republican Party controlling the legislature, the Senate, the governorship, the Public Service Commission. Just to clarify, we are all Republicans, but the Republican Party does not control this Public Service Commission in any way, shape, or form. But just a changing of words, but not the intent. I'd also want to point out that, again, the point I made about gas prices being a pass-through and that the company does not make a profit off of that. It's my understanding, Mr. Duncan, that when Northwestern has to go out and buy power on the open market, that is not a profit maker for them. They don't get a profit off of that. In addition to that, if they have to use several $1 million that is borrowed money, then they have to pay interest on that borrowed money. And can you tell me, if that's the case, do they ever get compensated for that interest cost?
Mr. President, Commissioner O'Donnell, I think you have two questions there. First of all, no, Northwestern does not make any profit on their electric supply tracker on the PCAM. It is strictly a pass-through. Mm-hmm. Also, as I recall, Crystal Lale in her testimony addresses the situation that you're talking about, where there have been some utilities and energy shortages in the past that have actually been forced to borrow money to buy electricity. I would suggest you read, I don't remember what I don't believe Northwestern has been in that situation, but I'm just recalling what I can recall. I would suggest you read Crystal Lale's testimony in that regard because it is addressed in her testimony.
Well, the point I was making is that not only is it not a profit-making venture for Northwestern, it might even be regressive in terms of that, cost them money, Mr. President.
Commissioner Fielder, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to go back to something Mr. Duncan had said, just to get clarification on it. Mr. Duncan, you had mentioned during your presentation that Northwestern has generated 56% of the power they've dispersed, and they are buying the rest either on the open market or through QFs. Is that correct?
Mr. President, Commissioner Fielder, yes, that's correct. Those are numbers taken directly from their 2021 PSC annual report.
Okay, and then can you please explain how much is coming from the open market versus the QFs? I believe you gave those numbers, but I didn't have a chance to jot them down.
Mr. President, Commissioner Fielder, according to the annual report, Northwestern essentially purchased 44% of the power dispersed to customers in 2021. And 1.9 megawatts was 1.9 million megawatts was from purchased power. $1.7 million was from the QFs. I might also add that the PCAM is one of the components that they get reimbursed for, has a PCAM cost element in it. The PCAM cost element is not and has not been part of the problem with their under collections. What's in the base has been fairly accurate, as I recall, as to what they've actually paid the QFs. The problem lies essentially only with the purchase power piece of that.
Thank you. That was my only question, Mr. President.
Thank you, Commissioner Fielder. Additional discussion or questions? Vice President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just two very brief observations. First, I think it's important to point out that if in fact, at the conclusion of the rate case, this interim rate increase turns out to represent an overcollection, that overcollection will be refunded to the ratepayers with interest. So there is that level of protection attached to this decision. The other thing that I would point out is that the Federal Reserve has now implemented, I believe it's 375 basis point rate increases in the recent terms. So the cost to Northwestern of cost of debt going forward is already going to be significantly increased. And if there is, in fact, a downgrade that should take place in addition to that, we could be looking at saddling ratepayers with some significant long-term costs that might otherwise be avoided. And I just think that's one more reason to grant the interim rate increase at this juncture, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Additional discussion or questions? Seeing none, I think we can do a voice vote on this one unless anybody wants a roll call. All right, all those in favor of the Vice President's motion to adopt staff recommendation signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Duncan, Ms. Umstead, and Mr. Fink. You did a yeoman's job in preparing for this matter. We appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Okay. Work session item number 5 is commission initiated. This will be a closed session item. This is to provide an update on currently pending litigation and discuss litigation strategy involving the Montana Public Service Commission. I would state at this time that the presiding officer of any meeting may close the meeting during the time discussion relates to a matter of litigation and or litigation strategy, and the presiding officer determines the need to protect agency litigation decision-making and discussion exceeds the merits of public disclosure. I have determined the discussion in this closed session will involve discussions and decision-making related to ongoing litigation in which the agency is involved as a party. Therefore, I have determined that the interests of privacy outweigh the interests of disclosure under the Montana Constitution. Accordingly, as the presiding officer's meeting, I am closing this meeting to the public. I would note for the record that upon conclusion of the closed session, we will adjourn today's business meeting. Our next commission business meeting will be Tuesday, October 4th, 2022. All right, thank you, colleagues.